I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Zee Garcia. Hello! Welcome back, y'all.
Hey, it's almost Christmas time. Merry Christmas. We're not doing this all week. We're doing one of these today, one Thursday, one Friday. And we're going through the last 10 years of gaming. We're now up to 2015.
2015. We're halfway there. 2015. Oh, what a wonderful year, as you'll soon see. We're going to be talking about 4 categories here. We're going to start with top games of the year. After that, we're going to talk about some trends in gaming that we spotted from this year. Then we're going to talk about some of our picks from the year, and that's a tough call because there's a lot of good stuff. And then we're going to talk about some of your picks from this year. You can jump in with trends at that point too, whatever you want to talk about. We'll turn it over to you in the chat. Before we do that, do we have any shout-outs today?
Thanks, everybody, for sponsoring our Kickstarter. It starts on January 6th.
That's right. Thank you very much, y'all, and thanks for watching this. We love having you be a part of our little series here. So let's go ahead and kick it off with some of the great games this year. And the very number 2 game on BGG so far.
This game shot to number 1
it was
when
number
it came
1.
out. And in fact, 16 games from this year in the top 100. That is, I think, the most of any year. And so I think it can be successfully said that 2015 is one of the best years there is.
I agree. It's unbelievably good. And this game, like you said, was number 1 for a long time, actually.
It was.
It stuck to it for a while.
But it's the fastest I've ever seen a game go to number 1.
Yeah.
It came out and was just like up to that. If you can't see, it's Pandemic Legacy Season 1.
An amazing game, chock full of story, and of course turning the core game of Pandemic, using that to make a legacy game that evolves with you.
And I remember
your choices.
This was they had announced this, and we were like, oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
It sounds really cool. And we had talked about it. We saw the box at Gen Con and frothing. This was one of the most excited I was ever about playing a game.
This is one of the few games that had a tremendous, seemingly insurmountable amount of hype, and met that hype.
It's also the first. Risk Legacy was the beginning, but this was the first Legacy game that really did anything.
Yeah, agreed.
Through the Ages was a reprint. It was a very nice reprint, but it wasn't a new game that year per se. This Seven Wonders Duel was a surprise to me because Seven very rarely does the 2-player version of a game do it just as well, seemingly, as its original. I mean, we had seen Agricola, Caverna, many of these, Le Havre, many of these big games have 2-player versions, which are not nearly as popular as the main game. Seven Wonders Duel is pretty close.
Seven Wonders Duel is rated more highly than Seven Wonders on Board Game Geek.
And 17 is not a small thing for a 2-player game.
And this is for a game that has a single expansion also since 2005. 2015. That's pretty good. I think that's just true staying power. I remember playing this. I played a prototype of it at Gen Con and was just blown away. Very exciting game. And then Viticulture was another one that, as you said, Through the Ages sort of had a reissue. Viticulture Essential Edition was a reworking of it.
And it really shot up.
Yeah, they included a few new rules. O Grande Worker was one of the new things, a new worker. And then there was also, of course, extra content that you would get in the Tuscany box if you chose to get that as well when this came out. And then Food Chain Magnate. Tom, you haven't rated this?
Thanks. Here we have a trio of games that all made a big splash in their own ways.
Yes.
Food Chain Magnate was a very popular game. I mean,
Splatter.
Splatter has had its own fans, but Food Chain Magnate is one of those ones that almost overflowed and had people not normally playing those.
Like a fizzy Coke.
Blood Rage was the first bona fide non-zombie-side hit that Command had at this point, and it showed this is the game I think that put Eric Lang on the map. He had done many games prior to this, but this game really got people up in a froth.
Yeah, this game got that name across people's minds that wouldn't have bothered to know who made the game. You know what I mean? Like folks who wanted to know about designers maybe knew who Eric Lang was. He'd done some collectible card games, stuff like that, a few smaller games. Blood Rage was huge. You probably heard of it around this time, and with that, a lot of times came his name, you know.
Kingdom Death Monster was its own huge thing. This was a Kickstarter had launched almost at the very beginning of Kickstarter.
Right.
Made a lot of money. Took a long time to came out. Finally came out, and you can see it has very few ratings compared to the other ones. Only 6,000, but they're very high, dedicated fan base.
Yeah, it's a huge game.
Marco Polo was, I think, almost the first game that brought Italian designers. Hey, they're here now.
Right.
And because we hadn't heard much. I mean, I guess there was in 2012 we had the Zolkin. Right.
Well, there was Zolkin, but then this year we had Marco Polo and Council of Four came out this year. I think you're right. It's around this time because we had German designers, of course, been around for a long time, and they were popular for a long time, and international, I'll call it. And French designers had already done that. But you're right. I think Italian designers, Paolo Moria, who I believe is Italian, had already been making a few games, but that was it. You thought, okay, mention some Italian designers. Paolo Moria was the only one I could think of. Oh, and Colovini, who I believe is Italian, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you're right. They came out with a lot of good stuff around this time.
Right, and this was still, we had talked about this last time in 2014 with a lot of Euro games. Still a very big thing. We had the Galleris, Mombasa, and then we had a game which just, every once in a while a game comes along that just blows up everything.
You Must Whip It. Comes along. You must whip it.
Okay, got it. Codenames.
Codename comes along. You must whip it.
So anyway, Codenames. I remember at the beginning of the year when we saw Codenames at the Gathering of Friends and everybody was going gaga over it. And then as the year went by, it just was like...
I remember seeing it originally and being like, huh? What's everybody losing their minds about?
And
seems like some little party game.
You can see 56,000 ratings. There's a few games that become a mega hit. Codenames is one of those, still being made. Sitting right over there, I can see Codenames The Simpsons, you know? It's coming out, it's in Target, it's everywhere.
Codenames After Dark or whatever that one was called, yeah.
Codenames
it's everywhere. They made so many.
Easily the biggest game that came out this year.
Oh, by far.
Yeah.
This number truly does not reflect how many copies of this
I know.
sold.
There's been more than 56,000.
There's a lot of disparity between these numbers and how many copies are sold. That's a given, but I guarantee you that disparity is way less for, say, Raiders of the North Sea than for Codenames. A lot of people who have never heard of Board Game Geek have played and bought Codenames. It's huge, you know.
Raiders of the North Sea was not Garfield Games' first published game.
No, right.
But it's definitely one that put him on the map.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think Time Stories helped Space Cowboys a lot. I mean, they had other stuff up to this point, but Time Stories was this audacious experiment. Mm-hmm. When I first showed it to me, I was like, we'll have to wait and see. But it went over pretty well and lasted for a good 4 years. It ended just now.
Right.
More Italian designers of Grand Austria Hotel. Mm-hmm. Forbidden Stars was one of the last collaborations between Games Workshop and Fantasy Flight.
Yeah, this one lasted a very short time, actually. This came out, was on the market for not a very long time when the news went public that they were no longer working together. So this was a hard one to get, you know, and quickly became hard to get. Yeah, it was weird timing all around. This one never had a chance.
I agree.
Yeah, it sort of had the legs cut out from under.
However, it's still ranked very highly.
It is.
94. Then Champions of Midgard, the game that kind of put Gray Fox on the map.
I should mention Forbidden Stars also is kind of a reworking of a previous game that FFG had put out, also based on an IP. StarCraft, yeah.
Tricarion was the game that helped put Mind Clash on the map. There's a lot of these you'll see as each year comes by.
Right.
Come On was Zombicide Black Plague.
Follow up to that, yeah.
Isle of Skye won the Kenner Spiel that year.
Right. Did.
So that was like a Carcassonne-ish game. Fury Dracula is another one of those last collaborations. The
third
fourth
edition.
They call it third,
edition,
fourth.
Yeah. Fourth was afterwards. WizKids picked it up. Was it WizKids? I think it was.
Yes.
And they published what they're calling fourth edition, almost identical to third. But this was third edition, and again, kind of vanished fairly quickly.
We talked about Mysterium last time when it had gotten a small release and people were buzzed about it. Now it came out and did well. Above and Below, this is where Ryan Laukat started getting noticed. I think this is the game that made people go, wow, this guy's really good. I mean, he had done games up till now.
Yeah, he'd done a few things like The Ancient World had come out already.
But he was now
point.
Almost mainstream, I feel, at this point.
This is the beginning of his mixing storytelling and story-driven games with what he was doing before. You know, and out of this concept came quite a few games, right? Above and Below, Near and Far, Sleeping Gods is coming out soon. This was a major push, and some of his better liked work came out from this. Near and Far being probably his best liked game.
Right. Star Wars Armada was a follow-up to X-Wing. Was not as popular, but still is in production to this day at this point.
Yeah.
Cthulhu Wars. This one, it's weird because there's only 3,916 raiders here.
Very low, yeah. I was surprised that it was that low.
I see this quite often. This Peterson Games hadn't been known for big stuff, and they were like, "Well, you want to see big stuff?"
Oh, this game made an impression for sure. Yeah, the miniatures, if they can so be called, in this game, are tremendously large. It's an epic-looking game. There's no denying that, and that partly comes from Kickstarter. Kickstarter allows for that to happen. Then we had a reprint of Mission Red Planet, the second edition of that, which added a few new concepts back in from the original one. Tiny Epic Galaxies.
Which is still, I think, their most highly rated of the Tiny Epic games.
It's my favorite, certainly. Arboretum came out that year from Z-Man Games, was reprinted not so long ago from Renegade Game Studios.
Stockpiles is good at putting Naboo. This was their first game. They've made some bigger games since, but that helped them out.
Right. Raptor was a great game from that year, a two-player only game from a couple of French designers, and a really solid two-player design. I remember playing a prototype of that at Gen Con that year. By this time, I was definitely going to a few conventions a year, so I'm starting to connect games to conventions.
And I guess I'm not going to mention this in trends, but one of the trends this year that could have been mentioned, and you remember because we went to the store on
on Star Wars Day, right?
Because the new movie came out in 2015, the first one of the new. The third one just came out, and it was Star Wars everything. That's why this X-Wing core set, which wasn't even had already come out in 2012, but this is 333 because they were just like anything Star Wars. I mean, I went out and bought I think 15 different Star Wars games.
Yeah, there's a bunch
there was
of
a lot of Star Wars games.
Bunch of product that day that showed up. Yeah. The Grizzled is a great cooperative card game.
You gonna get on my case about that one?
That's okay. I don't actually care.
Elysium, I heard of that before.
I really like that card game as well. And they reprinted Game of Thrones, second edition of that LCG, came out that year.
This is such a big year. Look, Potion Explosion's this far down the list, and that was a very popular game that came out that year.
And by this point, you can definitely start to tell and see, come on, explore stuff outside of what
Sure,
they
but I
normally were
don't
doing.
think they took Potion Explosion until 2016. I think in 2015 it was still horrible games.
But the Grizzled was theirs right off the bat.
That's true. They were messing around with other stuff. Now here's Karuba. Now Karuba won the Spielsjahres that year, if I'm recalling correctly.
I don't believe so.
It was nominated for the Spielsjahres.
It might have been. I don't believe so. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head who won that year.
Broom Service.
That's Kennerspiel, right?
Oh, that's right. It's one of those years where there's two Kenner Spiels in the same year, Isle of Skye and Broom Service.
Okay.
Because they don't go from January to December necessarily.
Sure, right. Yeah, Broom Service won. It must have been the year after. And that was a reworking of yet another game. Again, lots of reworkings or republications around this time. And I want to come back to this when I'm talking about my trends in just a moment here.
Spectre Ops helped put Emerson Matsuchi on the board. That was a very well-received game.
Yes, absolutely. Hey, look at that. Love Letter Batman.
That still makes me laugh.
Lots of fun was made of that game, but Love Letter was churning out games, boy. They were going.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, look how far down XCOM is. This is one to talk about because this made a big deal about, this is going to be the future of gaming.
Absolutely.
And using an app mixed with a cooperative game, and it did fine. But as you can see, it's still $5.97.
Yeah.
And this is still this year. Oh my good, it's got a lot of buzz, but not in 2015.
No, that was later. Yeah.
They had to change a rule to the game. Flick 'em Up came out down here. Pursuit of Happiness. There's really
more Italian designers.
I didn't realize Lanterns would be this far down. But this was a game that Lanterns had come out. This was the year that Renegade started coming together. Renegade was an offshoot, actually, of Cryptozoic. He left Cryptozoic, took a few games with him, and he started reprinting a few other games. And Lanterns was the first game that was kind of like theirs. And I remember we were at the same booth near them at Gen Con.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, they got Lanterns, and now Renegade is a fairly decent-sized publisher.
Yeah.
But 2015 is when that started. Catacombs, the new edition of that came out.
Third edition of that, yeah. Gold West, which is a great Euro game, put J. Alex Kevern, the designer, on my radar around that time.
Look, there's Risk Star Wars Edition, which is actually not like Risk at all. It's closer to Queen's Gambit.
Right. Automania was one of the big hits from Aporta Games that put them on my radar as well. At this point, I was thinking, this designer, he works with Aporta. I think he's one of the owners of Aporta, but he's made a few other games like Escape, The Dungeon, right, that game. He made that, and he's made a few other games, but this designer could go so many places, and I always found his designs enthralling. He's also the one who designed Perfect Alibi, a deduction game. A pretty, kind of Clue-esque, but modern deduction game. So very impressed by them.
New York 1901 was a turning point for Blue Orange. They had not done many Euro games up to that point. They had just done silly games, really, really light games, or kids games.
Yeah, actually, this was a turning point. This year was a turning point for two companies in what they put out that is very obvious to me. Blue Orange is one. This was, New York 1901 was definitely a push for a spiel kind of game, right?
Sure.
Gorgeous artwork, clearly a family game, standard box size. That's, it was that move for the family market. And then the other one was Haba. Haba, this was the first year they came out with their family line.
They had not done that before, and that's a good point.
They were kids, publisher, and this year they came out with several games. Adventureland is one you like very much. Karuba is one I like very much. And so, both of these companies made a move for that, for that target demographic.
Yeah,
There's so much. It's an extremely strong year.
It really is. It's one of the best years. The game
was huge.
Yeah. There's so many games in this year that are big, and I'm kind of, as I go down here, I'm like, wow, they are pretty far down. I don't know how many games are on a page here. I want to say 100 maybe? And if that's the case, then that means almost 1/10 of the top 1,000 games are from this year.
Right.
That's pretty solid. A lot of great games came out this year, and as I'm driving everyone crazy by scrolling up and down, we'll quick look at the ones that had the most votes. I'm sure Codenames is on the top, and then Seven Wonders Duel is probably the second highest, and then Pandemic Legacy, which is amazing that got third.
I know, yeah.
And then Blood Rage, Mysterium, Viticulture, Time Stories, Through the Ages, and so on and so forth.
Tons.
So, Exploding
Kittens is obviously, again, that's probably way off.
That definitely is way off.
Yeah,
and we'll find that out in the next section.
All right, here we go. Let's talk about some trends, folks. And I'm going to go ahead and kick this off with...
did you say kick it off? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to kick it off with some Kickstarter news, yes. This was the year for me. I've been going through these years noticing, Kickstarter's here. Yeah, there's a few games coming from it. They're doing all right. They're playing with the big boys, so to speak. This was the year that Kickstarter... many times translated into cha-ching, big-time money. We're talking Kingdom Death Monster money. We're talking Cthulhu Wars. Over $1 million, not bad, but more than anything, Exploding Kittens.
Yeah, so
Exploding Kittens was a lot of money.
Exploding Kittens was weird that it kickstarted this year and was fulfilled this year.
Sure.
That doesn't happen very often. It was the biggest up to that point, and it still is one like in the top 5 Kickstarters, $8.8 million. The other 2 biggest Kickstarters of that year, the Zombicide Black Plague was $4.1 million, and Conan was $3.3 million.
Mm-hmm.
There was $88 million total backed in that year, with 500,000 backers.
Wow.
That's crazy. Crazy, not just tabletop games.
Yeah. So, again, Kickstarter was suddenly a massive player, and there were no qualms about going there to get big bucks. It was apparent now. It was no longer, I think around this time was the shift from, I cannot get this published, so I'm going to go to Kickstarter, to, I could get this published, but I'd rather go to Kickstarter.
Right.
And it was around this time just because that money was there,
Piggybacking up on that, you mentioned this a little bit about 2014, but 2015 was the year where Games Workshop, I was like, why are you doing the way things you are? Because plastic was no longer a concern.
Right.
Look at Cthulhu Wars. Obscenely gigantic plastic figures in it.
And just obscene also.
Well, there was that. And Blood Rage had come out this year. And so many companies, Kingdom Death Monster and all these,
Sure.
They were coming out with so much plastic in them to the point where there was almost like a backlash, like, oh, it's plastic, it's toys.
Right.
But there was so much plastic in games. I think it's slightly calmed down, but not much. Ever since 2015, your game... If you want to Kickstarter do well...
You can go to Kickstarter and throw up a bunch of renderings of miniatures, and you are likely to do well. Yes.
Yeah, and that's for good or for worse, honestly.
Yeah.
Sometimes these are not that impressive. A lot of them are good games. The plastic is fun. There's nothing wrong moving big plastic figures around.
No, yeah, absolutely.
But I definitely noticed that in 2015.
But they are pushed front and center. There's no question.
Yes.
Your game can be one of the most innovative games out there. And if you go to Kickstarter with minis, the minis are front and center. And you mentioned that your game is very innovative somewhere in a paragraph. That's how it works, So that's a good one, yeah. Mainly this one for me is, well, I'll go ahead and mention this up here that you sort of decided to mention in passing there. But yeah, it was the beginning of these app-assisted kind of games. We had already, as you mentioned last time, the Alchemists game,
right,
which was app-assisted in a way, but XCOM felt like it couldn't be made without the app. The way they
they put it in there a way to do it, and you're like, nope.
Yeah,
people are not playing this without the app.
Right. And this was the first one that, to me, I remember playing a demo of it with you. In fact, at Gen Con that year, very early on, like the day before Gen Con.
That's right.
We sat down and played. And this was new. This was different. This was a proper mixture of a board game and basically a video game. And you needed both halves, or it wouldn't quite work. So that was a big one. This began that. XCOM actually didn't really stick around.
Not really.
Didn't do that well, but it allowed one of the big companies to take that risk to do it, and then everybody else was a little more confident to give it a go. But again, that's minor because it wasn't bombastic this year. It was one game. The other thing, and the more macro view of the year and the trends at large in the decade, was this year there was a clear, pure, and absolute hunger for more games, more content. And that's apparent in not just the number of games being released and how many of them, did well, but also you look at the number of reprints. You look at the number of experiments this year. There were things that I never would have expected, right? So, for example, I'll point out a few things here that I think inform my idea of this hunger for games. We had a game come out called 504 this year, which was 504 games in one box in concept. This was a very experimental idea in which you would combine different modules, and based on those permutations, you could arrive at 504 different permutations. Very abstracted game, pretty much all those 504 very abstracted. But that was the push. You can buy one game and get 504 games. and it was that just hunger for more games. This was the year that BGG published a game. They published a game called I Hate Zombies. It was a little micro game.
Word.
And they got into the game as well. This was the year that The Cones of Dunshire was published for real.
Yes.
This year, based on a TV show that mentioned a board game in passing. I made up one. This year made it real. This was, if I'm not mistaken, the first year we had an advent calendar from Brett Spiel.
Oh, you're right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
It's this, it's just a collection of promos for all those 25 days. You got to open something. Each one is a promo for a different game. This was also the year that, again, and this is not all good, though, right? This hunger for games. This is also the year that Hengist was published. Hengist is a game from...
You're using that.
Absolutely, I am. Yeah, Hengist is a game from Uwe Rosenberg, who's been hot, right? This game is rated 18,000 on BGG. Did you know that?
It's that low?
It's that low. It is a... You'd be hard pressed to find someone who does not say, at best, this game is extremely boring. At worst, it's broken. But it says Uwe Rosenberg on the cover when you publish it. There is that hunger. That was there. And they pushed ahead with this game. It's a very bad game. So, yeah, that was my main takeaway from looking at the year as a whole.
I think that, piggybacking on that real briefly, not only was that...
Hengist sucks, I know.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, that's not what we're talking
People were also trying to get everything for a game. The Blood Rage, extra stuff. People went berserk trying to get that stuff. It was just crazy. But the bigger trend, one of the big trends was Time Stories / Pandemic. It was
Absolutely.
a 1-2 punch. In fact, in 2016, both of them were nominated for the Kenner Spiel because they both did different things. Is this story, narrative-driven games you mentioned, but also disposable games. Both of them, when you were done, you didn't play again. I guess in Time Stories, you could forget.
There was a big backlash about that, I remember.
There was, and if you notice, though, they're both in the ranked top 10, and people owning them. So that's definitely something that's going to pave the way, you'll see in future years, for the escape room games.
Yes.
Those things really picked up on this, but at the time, Pandemic Legacy was huge. The Z-Man games was mind-boggled by this. They didn't have enough ready. They had said it was I think they were saying it was a one-time print run, right? And then they realized that they needed like 80,000 for that initial print. And then Time Stories, I don't think that Space Cowboys was prepared for how big that would be.
No,
either.
I agree, because I remember specifically them promising these packs, these scenarios, to come out at a specific rate, and that just wasn't feasible.
No.
They couldn't keep up. Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I noticed. The different trends that year for sure.
Yeah,
Gaming was big in 2015.
There were a few minor things. There was social deduction games. We're definitely having a day. Mafia de Cuba came out. Salem, 1692. One Night Revolution came out that year. There were a lot of those, but for the most part, the big ones I think we've covered. So let's talk about some of our favorite picks, shall we? What do you got? I want you to start off.
Well, first I'm going to start off with my favorite pick of 2015 is Z.
Yeah. Oh, that's cute.
But Z and Sam. Z for almost all 2015. Sam for the second.
That's right.
The last third of it. That's when Z started working for the Dice Tower.
That's right. February.
It wasn't even like something we had planned for a long time. It was just near the end of 2014. I was like, I should probably get somebody. And Z said, yeah, just due to layoffs and stuff.
I was teaching at the time, and that was rough because what I taught was, well, it's an art. It's so
how our schools love the arts.
The budget drops $10. They're throwing you out the door. That's how that works. So I remember thinking, I'm going to stop pushing towards maybe moving to a different school or try to do all this other stuff and just give this thing a shot. Because I was
I asked him. It didn't take. Actually, you didn't take a long time to say yes.
Yeah. Well, I figured, if this is a time to try it out, when you're in between things, this is the time to experiment. So I thought, let's try. Let's see what happens. And well,
This was also, so it went well. We then added Sam later on in the year. It was the first year that we went to the Gathering of Friends. It was the first year that we went to Essen as a complete entity with a booth and all that stuff.
That all happened in 2015, really?
Yeah, 2015. Remember, it's 2019. We're not that far in the past now.
I know. It feels like...
It does feel like a long time ago.
I didn't realize, like, for example, you mentioned the Gathering. I did not realize I went to the Gathering the very first year I started with you. Okay.
Maybe it was just me? I don't know. But
I don't recall, honestly.
It's so long
I also
ago.
was, like, around you and helping you with minor things here and there for several years before that. So it's all a little nebulous to me.
All right, so you want to pick for me? I'll give you one. Flick 'em up. Pretzel Games was a new thing that was being started,
right?
an offshoot of Plan B games, it wasn't Plan B games at the time. Sorry, it was still Z-Man. And Pretzel Games was an offshoot of that because Pandemic was still there. But
so Philosophia hadn't bought anyone there yet, right? Is that right?
No, Philosophia they had bought Z-Man.
Okay, that's right.
Philosophia, I don't know if this was the year they were bought by Asmodee. No, I think it was 16. They were bought by Asmodee, and they kept Pretzel Games separate. But Pretzel Games was still owned by them at this point. And Flick 'em Up was this was the forefront of what was to become a whole lot of flicking games. There had been some. Catacombs also was reprinted this year.
It's true.
But Flick 'em Up was one that I had. What about you?
So for me, I picked some of the ones that we necessarily weren't going to talk about, but you mentioned
Same here.
Storytelling games or story-driven games. I picked a game called Watson and Holmes. It came out from a small Spanish publisher this year. You can now get this game from Asmodee. It got picked up and republished by Asmodee because it was a good game. It was a great game. And it's a case-driven deduction kind of game. You read information and try to solve the whodunit. It's not cooperative. Everybody's working together. And this is a game from the publisher, or the would-be publisher of Pandemic Iberia. Both great games, both Sherlock and Watson and Holmes, and Pandemic Iberia. So I really like this one. It's a great game.
Z already mentioned Automania for me.
Yeah.
This game kind of blew me away. This company, I hadn't known a whole lot about Aporta. I saw it. I was like, it looks okay. I played it. Really, really went over well. And I'll tell you what, on a side note, the number of my top 100 games, I've been working on that list for January. The number of my top 100 games that come from 2015 is not small. It is not small at all.
It's a tremendously good game. One more I'll mention here, Coffee Roaster, which is a solitaire game. So that was neat. There were not too many of them still. There were a few. Friday had come out, and Nirim and that line of games was going. But Coffee Roaster came out, but the really neat thing about it is it was the beginning of a company that I'm always fascinated by, a company called Saashi and Saashi. And I
believe there's a game being unboxed right now from that company.
That's very likely. There's a new one right in our other space. They've come out with a few games. It's sort of, they trickle out, but they seem like they're always busy, and I love the look of their games. But the designs are great. They're a reliable little company. They've done trick-taking games and solitaire games and roll and writes and all sorts of little, areas of design that are well tackled. I like that company a lot. I hold them in high regard. So that's the year of Coffee Roaster. By the way, also reprinted recently from, I believe, Stronghold. Reprinted them not too long ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Last one I would mention would be Looney Quest. This whole idea of using transparencies on games. Looney Quest did a good job of this. Another game that this one got some buzz over in Europe and then came over to America. It took a year or so. But this was just really cool stuff. And I'm mentioning these games because the big things like Seven Wonders Duel, Pandemic Legacy,
of course we like that. Elysium, Karuba, I wrote that down too, but we talked about it.
It was such a good year. I really had a good time doing it. And so, what are your guys' picks? What did you think about 2015? What did you like? That I think as we get farther into these years, you all should have more to say, right?
I think so. For example, Math Flux, says Anna. She was a huge fan of Math Flux. I think it's her game of the year.
In 2019? 2015?
No, I'm saying it's been her game of the year since. I have no idea.
Celestia was the reprint of Balloon?
Cloud9.
Cloud9. It was a really nice, that company put it together with really great production of it, and
Yes. Yeah, very nice.
then Quick Simple Fun Games picked it up, but in 2015 it had not been picked up by them yet.
Right.
Nippon and Mombasa. Oh yes, Scott. Mombasa, a lot of great Euros for sure. Scott says, not Scott.
Yeah, that person's name is
he's
Scott.
just spelling them out. Fuse.
Fuse is cool. Fuse is a little
Yeah,
bit
this whole
like...
real-time co-op thing was starting to take effect at this
Right,
point.
it's a little bit like Escape.
Argenta Consortium. Wow, that's a big game with a gazillion ways to place workers. One of the biggest worker placement games I played before.
Tides of Time was neat. It
Was that this year?
Yeah, it was kind of a micro game, but for only 2 players, and a drafting game. Which when I first heard about it, I was like, wait, drafting game for 2? And it's a micro game? It's like 18 cards in it. But it works. Very cool game.
The Grizzled, yeah. A lot of people, I remember the Grizzled, people were talking about it because it was so unlike everything else. A somber theme, a small box cooperative game that felt bigger, I guess, than the box.
Right.
You played it a ton in 2015.
I did play it a lot.
Then
Let's see, what do we got?
Ticket to Ride UK Pennsylvania came out this year. Hasn't been that long. Whew.
This person saying the Champions of Midgard was the best, though it didn't get great until the expansions came out. I think it was already, lots of folks were loving it. I think it got better with the expansions. Most everybody will agree with you, but yeah, it was getting a lot of buzz at the time. Potion Explosion we talked about.
Tom, you're going to try Coffee Roaster now that has a reprint, and you're a full-on definite solo gamer.
Are you a full-on definite solo gamer now?
No. No.
Have you ever even played a solitaire game?
Do I even solo?
You have to say bro.
Oh, Xenoshift was the first or not game from come out. I don't know if it was the first, but it was one of the first ones to come out. The Xenoshift game, I remember that came out.
Because it wasn't a miniatures game. And the Grizzled came out that year. That whole cool mini or not thing went away quickly after this.
Yep, so a fantastic year. I still think 2012 was more important for gaming in general, but 2015 might be, for me personally, what a strong year.
It was an amazing year for sure.
I mean, we still have 16, 17, 18, 19 left, and those are getting closer and closer to us. 15 may be, I don't know, sometime me and Z will do our top 10. We'll rank them by years. But you can expect to see 2015 pretty high.
Yeah, I can tell that this year was so strong because there are still a bunch of games that I'll see mentioned that I know I haven't played and I want to. You know, like one of them here is Steampunk Rally. I never did get that played. That one slipped through the cracks for me. And it's a great looking game from a great company. I love their stuff. You know, they really just hit their stride after this. But so much, good stuff that came out this year. It's hard to narrow it down. But hopefully you enjoyed our discussion. Thanks for participating, everybody, and joining us along. We're going to be coming back, as Tom said, in 3 days for our look at 2016 as we get ever closer to the present. That's it.
Well, then, until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Z Garcia. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, everybody.
Woohoo! And a Happy New Year.
Have fun gaming. Bye.
Thanks so much for watching another Dice Tower video. If you enjoy our videos, subscribe to the channel for more fun, comprehensive board game coverage. Also, consider joining us at one of our events. Come to Dice Tower Retreat, a small, intimate gathering where gaming is king. Join us for Dice Tower Cruise, the largest board game cruise. Attend Dice Tower West in Las Vegas for gaming fun on the West Coast, or Dice Tower East in Orlando in sunny Florida. Dice Tower Conventions, the friendliest gaming conventions on Earth. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.